Hello, this is Nicole Kali from Black Rockers United and NicoleKali.com, and this is Haunted Mid-Atlantic Tales, Volume 7. Welcome to 2021, y'all. We did it. It was not the easiest year, 2020, to say the least. That's an understatement. There was the pandemic of COVID-19. There was the dissolution of capitalism and a lot of rigid individualism, if someone put it on Twitter. We have to adapt mutual aid, and we have to understand that we are part of an interconnected network of living beings and non-living beings. This world that we live in, planet Earth, is home to more than humans and animals. There's also non-human entities here, spirits. And we inhabit the same space, but not the same realm necessarily. There's overlaps with ours. There's the afterlife and the other side, and then there's the living plane. But we have experience, for example, with a being that is actually in another celestial realm all the time. We call them angels, we call them spirits, demons, jinn, whatever you classify the otherworldly as, and there's many different kinds. I want you to be open-minded in 2021 to the possibilities of your potential, of the potential to interact with magic and what we consider the holy spirit, which is transcendent of religion. That is simply the power of the universe converging to commune with you. You're familiar with the Ghost of Virginia by now, and we have plenty of stories from this volume that'll titillate you and hopefully make you consider what is and what could be. Chapter 18, Phantoms in Fauquier County, A Bigger Fright. This was no scare compared to when I got at home in the old storehouse in Fauquier. The upper story had a hall and 2 rooms with 2 windows at the end of the rooms. And on the south side, there was a long closet that was about 4 feet high, tapering to nothing where the floor met the roof. And this closet or cuddy was always looked upon as a place to avoid, because only a few articles were ever put there, and those up near the door opened into the girls' room. When quite a small boy, about 8 years old, my curiosity prompted me to investigate this place, this closet. And in company with Arthur, I opened the door and called him to inspect it. It was agreed that he would shut me in, and I was to shut him in return. Well, he shut me in and I hollered so that he took fright and left me shut in, hollering with all my might. And it was some time before some of the family heard me and came to the rescue to release me. It was needless to narrate, I could never get Arthur to go in and let me shut the door. My experience was eerie enough. Chapter 20, Northern Virginia vignettes. Shout out Nova. Happy New Year, crew. Treeing a Ghost. Author's note. Donnie Johnston is the author of a charming book called Shut the Door, Harry, Tales of a Country Store. I found a copy at an antique store just outside Culpeper. Prefaced with the quotation, most of what you're about to read is true. Johnston recounts stories old-timers passed down in the mid-20th century as they gathered around a potbelly stove at his Aunt Dora's store, located somewhere north of Culpeper, Virginia. I quickly identified with them because my grandmother, born in 1866, ran such a store in Amherst County, beginning in the 1930s. And like Aunt Dora's, it was a favorite gathering place for farmers and others to while away long winter nights. And here, Johnson recalls an account given by a hunter who claims that his dogs treed a ghost one night about 70-odd years ago. The man said he was hunting in Bailey's Thicket in the dark when the dogs got on the trail of a ghost. We knew it was a ghost because they treed one, and we looked all up in that old tree, and there weren't nothing at all in there. Nothing. No birds. No nightingales. And I seen it, I tell you. A sliver of whiteness. I've seen dogs run and then tree, and when you get there and shine the light up in the top, there ain't nothing there. And you all know that if it had been a raccoon and jumped out of that tree, the dogs would have been all over them. If it had been a bird, they would have followed it to another tree. They would have just been standing at the base of that tree, baying to try to get up there in the branches. But no, sir. They were afraid because they had treed spirit. And here the author intoned, The fact is, none of us has ever suspected that a ghost could be treed. Had we pondered the idea more in depth, we most likely would have concluded the ghost just flew around. It didn't require the sanctuary of high branches. But then, upon even more consideration, we might have agreed that if they flew around, they might, as birds do, have rested in the treetops. The man said the dogs took off in a chase after something that they couldn't see, but that they soon came back, just to fly in, their tails tucked between their legs, and we thought they must have been scared by a ghost, so we decided to hightail it out of there. But wherever we went, those dogs stayed right at our heels, and those hunters got lost in their scramble and built a fire, and the man said the dogs started creeping closer and closer to it, and they finally got so close that the flames singed the hair on one of them. I suspect they knew that the ghosts were afraid of flame, that the power keeps them away. Because whatever the reason, those hounds stayed up into that fire until day broke. Chapter 28, A Treasury of Shenandoah Lore. Shenandoah is a mountainous range that runs all throughout the state of Virginia. The haunted dresser. In this instance, neither the narrator or the witness were identified. They remained anonymous. She came home one day and found 2 of her dresser drawers open slightly. She asked everyone in the family if they had been looking for something in the dresser, although she didn't know what, since they only held personal belongings. Everyone denied even being in the room. Nothing was missing. So when it happened again, she began to wonder if neighbor children were doing it or prowlers. She began to lock the door each time she went out, but still she would find 2 drawers missing, never the same ones, but always in varying combinations, 2. She wasn't scared, really interested to find out who was doing it, and always when the house was empty, She suspected a neighbor was giving in to pranks, so she devised traps to find out how they were getting in. She put tiny bits of clear tape on the bottom of each window, which no one noticed, but which would tell her if the windows had been opened or not. She dusted a tiny film of bath powder on the floor around the dresser to see which kind of footprints the person would leave. And she already made a test to see if traffic going by could rattle the drawers. But they couldn't. Passing by cars had no effect on the house. The drawers fit snugly and were slightly hard to open at that. She even pushed the family cat up behind the dresser to see if there's any way they could be climbing and forcing the drawers open. The cat was indignant and eyed her suspiciously, and by the way, couldn't open the drawers. She put all her traps into play and went out one night, secure in the knowledge that this night she would return and not find the drawers open. She returned at midnight on the dot, checked every window as she came to the house, all still taped, and climbed the stairs and entered her room. 2 drawers were open, and there were no footprints in the bath powder film on the floor. The dresser was the only piece of furniture that she had brought back with her to her home that had belonged to her mother. After her mom's death, they had looked after her pearls, which she had kept in the top drawer of this very dresser, and couldn't find them. Since her mother had been hospitalized for some time before her death, and many people, cleaning people and such, had had access to her apartment and the retirement home where she lived, her family figured someone had made off with them years ago. They were real pearls, a long-ago gift from her husband. Was this a spirit looking for the lost pearls? On checking the date when the openings began, it was the anniversary of her mother's death. Then a string of pearls was found shortly afterwards. The granddaughter took them away, and the dresser drawers were never opened again. Chapter 79, Southside Virginia Vignettes. A Message from the Grave. The following incident reportedly occurred at a tavern some miles south of Martinsville a little over 100 years ago, and was passed down generation to generation, retold in 1934 by Adelaide Fries. One day, a man on horseback rode up to the tavern and asked for a room. The tavern keeper, seeing that the man was ill, helped him to bed and sent for the doctor, but in spite of all the effort and care, the man lapsed into a coma before any questions were asked, and passed away without recovering consciousness. Investigation showed that his clothes weren't marked and that his saddlebags contained nothing, which gave a clue to their identity. So they were given a decent burial in the parish graveyard, and his saddlebags were laid away on the bare chance that they might be claimed. A few days later, the servants in the tavern became uneasy and began to talk about something haunting the place. The tavern keeper pooh-poohed the idea and sternly bade them behave, but the whispers and the nervousness continued. And one evening, the maid rushed into the office, pale with fright, and declared hysterically that something was out in the hallway, a haunting. Annoyed and impatient, the tavern keeper went to investigate, and to his utter amazement, became aware that something truly was there. Instead of running, the tavern keeper stood their ground and received a message which gave the name of their late guest, and the name of a man in Texas, said to be the late guest's brother. The message ended with a request that the brother be notified of their death. So the tavern keeper wrote a letter to the Texas addresses given describing the guest and giving full details of their passing away. And in due time, the answer came back, bringing full confirmation of the guest's identity and asking that the saddlebags be forwarded to the Texas home. I never heard what became of the horse, but it probably paid for the tavern room, medical care, and burial expenses, too. And as soon as the first letter to Texas was written, the manifestation ceased. And the shipment of the saddlebags permanently closed the incident, even the servants hearing no more of the supposed spirit, which apparently departed as soon as its errand was accomplished, and the saddlebags were mailed back home. Chapter 66, Folktales from the Backwoods. An encounter with a poltergeist. While still a boy, Fraley and his family moved to the lower end of Lee County, near the Tennessee line, and became sharecroppers on the North Fork of the Clinch River. There were knocking spirits on the home of one of our neighbors. He recalls, tables would rock back and forth and move about the room. The laws of gravitation were suspended completely, and objects in the room would drift about in the air. There was much speculation, amazement, and not to say consternation, prevailing in the neighborhood. The man whose home was all but knocked to pieces was Dr. Rufus Kyle, for whom Kylesford was probably named. He had a daughter by the name of Minnie, who appeared to be an innocent bystander, but if the spirits needed any assistance, it was believed that Minnie rendered it by no means obvious, in which only Minnie and the spirits could understand. I reached a conclusion based on a considerable amount of investigating, that the spirits, whether the knocking or some other variety, had no ill intent really, but occasionally Tyra was living in a twilight zone of obscurity and having a streak of exhibitionism or ego, just want to cut up a little and attract some attention. And when they can find a like-minded individual who's willing to cooperate, they put on a free show for a few weeks, or however long they want to confound the natives and have a little bit of fun. Chapter 86, Sampling of Spectral Snippets. Near Stafford, there is a trail off of Telegraph Road, which leads to a site known as the Witch's Pond. Supposedly, there is a sacrificial table that dates to the 1700s and earlier. One visitor called the place creepy, saying that they had a weird sensation that they shouldn't be there. She and her friend heard noises as they followed a path leading from the pond to an old abandoned cemetery, where overhanging trees lent the appearance of a cathedral. At the graveyard, they heard a loud shriek, and then heard something stomping through the woods. As they raced back to their car, they saw not a visible figure, but a dark shade. They thought it was cool, but they vowed to never go back. In Southern Virginia College in Buena Vista, a scene from a classic horror movie, The Shining, is repeated by a spectral figure of a young boy who is heard riding his bicycle up and down the 4th floor in one of the women's dormitories. Those living at the Orchard Crest apartments in Winchester have said that their lights inexplicably flicker on and off, their TVs and doors slam for no reason. The buildings were illegally built over an old cemetery, and not all of the bodies were reinterred. Some were forgotten, but not all the spirits have left.
In 1891, the Washington Star called Washington America's greatest haunted city. 100 years later, the Washington Post followed up with that and called Washington America's Gothic capital, the shining city on a haunted hill. So the ghosts have been around here for a long time.
The author of such classics as The Pit and the Pendulum and The Mask of the Red Death, he wrote some of his most terrifying tales while living at this house in central Philadelphia. Poe's spirit has been encountered in various locations throughout the city.
Haunted Places, a National Directory, District of Columbia. Father Boyles' exorcism. In September 1907, Father Boyle of St. Patrick's Church was asked to perform exorcism rites at a deserted home here. When he and an assistant entered a house and began to ignite the gas lights, poltergeist activity swept through the building. A heavy iron bar lifted across the front door. Moaning sounds moved from room to room, and a maniacal whirlwind blew furniture around like cardboard. The priest, needless to say, left without finishing the exorcism, and the owner of the house decided to have the house torn down rather than take any chances with the evil presence there. The house stood at 11 and D Street in Northwest Washington, D.C. Mount Rainier. Douglas Deen was almost 14 years old in January 1949 when strange noises began to come from his bedroom walls. silent nor witnessed by neighbors and other family members. And finally, the Deens contacted their minister, Reverend Winston, and he spent the entire night of February 18th with the boy. The Reverend heard unexplainable scratching noises, saw the bed move, and watched as a chair heaved the boy to the floor. Douglas was taken to Georgetown Hospital for complete mental and physical testing, but no problems could be found. He was later sent to St. Louis Hospital in Missouri for further testing, and in desperation, the family decided to have exorcism ceremonies performed on them with a team of Jesuit, Lutheran, and Episcopal priests who performed over 20 exorcisms in 35 days. Another priest stayed with the boy for 2 months and performed over 30 exorcism rituals. By May of 1949, the demons seemed to have left the boy, and the poltergeist manifestations stopped. The case was the basis for William Peter Blatty's novel and film, The Exorcist. The Deen family house is now a private residence, actually, in Mount Rainier, a suburb of Washington, D.C., northeast of the city, Highway 1. New Jersey, Cape May, Queen's Hotel. This quaint inn is haunted by an unknown presence. Objects and furniture in the plum room and the palm room have a way of moving by themselves, and sometimes an unseen presence bumps against the beds in these rooms. Both are on the 3rd floor of this inn, which used to be a fancy gambling hall and a brothel too. And in those days, the ladies' quarters were found on the 3rd floor. The Bed and Breakfast Inn is in the historic district of Cape May on 601 Columbia Avenue, North Carolina. Roan Mountain, ghostly choir. The heavenly sound of a choir has been heard on this mountain since the 1770s. The music was clearest just after a thunderstorm, and is said to grow in intensity before it reaches a wild crescendo. Historically, local herdsmen have attributed the singing songs to angels, but I think it might be the collective sound of all the spirits that lived on Roan Mountain before. Roan Mountain is in the Bald Mountain Range, located in Mitchell County, along the Tennessee border. Virginia, Governor's Mansion. The Virginia Governor's Mansion has been haunted since the early 1890s, when Governor Philip McKinney first saw the apparition of a beautiful young woman wearing a flowing taffeta dress. The ghost has been seen several times over the years, and has even been chased by butlers, servants, and other people in the house. She has been spotted near an upstairs bedroom, descending the staircase, and in the basement. Several governors have detected her presence, including Linwood Holton, who was governor in the 1970s. The mansion is off Lakeside Avenue in central Richmond. Waynesboro, the Easton House. This house has been dubbed the Ghost Hotel because of so many recurring ghostly manifestations here. Ever since Bill and Marie Easton moved into the house in 1967, they have been plagued by discarnate footsteps, appliances operating by themselves, and unexplainable crashing noises. When their children started talking to invisible presences named Mark and Amy, the Eastons definitely called in a medium. The psychic contacted a bevy of confused spirits in the 245-year-old house, including 2 Civil War lovers named Mark and Amy. Waynesboro is located in west central Virginia, 21 miles west of Charlottesville. Haunted Virginia, Chapter 46. Legend or Not. Mysterious Sword, Richmond. Oh, this is deep, y'all. So the Freemasons are a semi-secret society, mainly of well-to-do European-descended men. So there's a tale about the oldest Masonic hall in the United States of America, located in Jacobanum and Arva. And it seemed just after the Civil War, a meeting was held, and when it was dispersed, a sword was discovered. They say that the hall still has it to this day, waiting for the right person to come and claim it. I don't agree with the Freemasons and any elite society that would require money for your respect. But I do believe in 2021 embracing the potential of all that is and what could be. I hope that you enjoyed this session of Haunted Mid-Atlantic Tales, and I can't wait to see you again soon. Stay tuned for Black Rockers United content in January. Check in with me again sometime in the next 2 weeks.